procesos creativos, las prácticas críticas y las distintas maneras de pensar y hacer desde el diseño. Nos alegra especialmente contar con ustedes de esta masterclass titulada The Inner Path of Creation, a cargo de Ragnar Flodadottir, a quien agradecemos por compartir su mirada, su experiencia y su práctica con nuestra comunidad. Queremos recordarles que esta charla se realizará en inglés y que está siendo transmitida en vivo a través del canal de YouTube de la Facultad de Arte y Diseño, para quienes también puedan seguirnos de manera virtual. Finalmente, los invitamos a todas, todos y todes a quedarse y acompañarnos más tarde, a las 6:30 p.m., al desfile de egresados que será en la sala Wintermeets del pabellón Y de la Facultad de Arte y Diseño, que está a la mano derecha, caminando un poquito más allá. Un momento que será muy especial para nuestra especialidad, donde se verá materializado el trabajo de nuestros estudiantes, su investigación y también sus procesos desarrollados. Muchas gracias por estar aquí y por ser parte de este encuentro, y le doy el pase a... Thank you,
Thank you so much. Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming. And, I'm so sorry I don't speak Spanish, but I really hope you understand my English. I will not speak fast. I'll try to stay clear. So I'm gonna offer you a masterclass today called The Inner Compass of Creation. And this is me, I'm Ragnar, and I come from a country in the middle of nowhere, which is called Iceland. And I'm raised in a rose farm. This is me many years ago, where I grew up. At this time, you see there are not even trees in the country where I live in. Now we have more trees, but it's really like at the time there was nothing, and we have a very long winter, 9 months, and a summer that is 3 months. And in the winter, it's completely dark for many months, and in the summer, we don't have night, and in the summer, in the night. And but I grew up on this, surrounded by beautiful roses, because my father and grandfather, they had a greenhouse, and I bring it in to my lecture because it's important, because what I'm going to be talking about is how we are constantly taking in from our environment. Wherever we go, it affects us and it affects what we do. And for sure, this color palette of those roses has translated into my work today, because coming from the environment that I showed you earlier with this kind of gray, greenish landscape and a lot of rocks and volcanoes and moss and glaciers, a lot of Icelandic designers, they have a very neutral color palette that is very quiet, and it's a lot about just like gray and greens and khakis and background and black, but I have like a crazy color palette. Plus, I also studied in Paris, which also, and I embraced that, but I, as a kid, would spend time in those greenhouses that were heated by geothermal water. So I could enter the greenhouse and it had a tropical climate. And in this photo, you see that it was also, we had artificial light. So for me as a creative person, I'm so sure that this was a very big, it was a big effect on my work. That's why it's really like places that really has effects on our perception, where we come from. And my experience coming from this country in the middle of nowhere is different from you coming from the South America. We are really the opposite. But what we have in Iceland also, which has been a key element and the characteristics in me both as a person, creator, artist, is that I grew up in weather conditions, which I explained that, we have very long winters, we have very short summer, and the weather is very intense. We are on the tectonic plates, surrounded by the sea. So for us, it can be nice in the morning and then suddenly it changes and it's like a snowstorm. So we don't see the big picture. We don't look at the big picture. We are just like, how can I fix this now? And we are very good at that. So we are very solution-oriented people, Icelanders. And we even have a saying that is called, we'll figure it out, which means that whatever comes to our to me to be solved, I will find somehow a way to solve it with a very short time. So we are also hardworking people coming from this harsh environment. And that is also important because this is what I bring with me into the world. This is what I bring with me, and then I mean to the places I've lived. I've lived in Paris, that's where I studied. I've lived in Berlin, I've lived in New York, I still live in New York. And then I'm like, I had to spend time in Denmark. And also as an island in the middle of nowhere, Iceland, we had to also, in order for me to see something different, I would always need to take a plane. Before, when the Vikings, before they would take a ship. But for me, there's always, I cannot drive to another country. I mean, I don't know how it is here, but in Europe, you can drive between countries and you experience different culture wherever you go. You experience different gastronomy wherever you go. But for us, it's like we have to take a plane. We always have to take a plane. So that is also very important. And I'm a big believer in that the value that we bring also into the life is through the hands-on lived experience. So everything that I do, everything the people I meet, even this experience to come to Peru, is gonna somehow translate into my work, into the way I see the world, because I'm in a different continent, there's a different language. And then for my work, it's also this like, I need to be mating. I need to be mating to be also to understand some things. I cannot sit and just think about them. I get it through the touch, the mating of the so back, sorry. No, it's okay. Yeah, it's just that because wherever we are, it's like we take in and we record. It's like I'm avoiding camera. I'm just avoiding video camera. You know, it all goes into my system. That's why also it is so important to move and go and see the world and experience it. And I think more than ever today in the world, because we can so easily do it through their screen, through our devices, but it's not the same as me here being in the presence of different people. This is definitely going to affect me. So the inner compass is already there for all of us. And I work in film forecasting in New York. It's industry in the fashion business where we provide material for designers to decide. We give them color palettes. We show them which directions the fashion industry is going. We help them to see ahead and we give them inspirations. But it's also a tool to help them to confirm what they are already thinking. So it's not always about like, I'm telling you something you didn't know. And probably many things I'm gonna talk about today is something that you are like, yeah, I know, I've experienced it. And that's how it is. But the reason why I bring up the trend forecasting is that we are all we all have our antennas and we are understanding, like, I have a feeling this is gonna go. I mean, I see that yellow is important, or I know that this type of texture is important. Now everybody in the art world, at least in the US, are interested in fiber art. Why is that? Because we need the tactility. We are all craving tactility from sitting in front of our computers, the screen, 2D, we want 3D. We want to be able to touch. We want to be able to experiment. So no matter what medium we're in, we want to do textiles or ceramics. Ceramics is the same. It's all about the hand. And when we start to think about our inner compass or our intuition or this inner guidance, it's like we learn to recognize it. When we start to listen and we start to just follow it, like, I'm not going to follow this. I'm going to follow what's going on here. And then we look back, oh yeah, that's how I was right. So we start to like hear better this voice. And as a creative, it's very important for me. It has been to learn to listen to it, to learn to love it, respect it, follow it. It's like, yeah, this is my compass. I could always be asking you, like, what do you think? Like, what, should I be doing this? Or do you think I should go there? Or what do you think? And you might tell me something, but it's from your perspective. It's not from my lived experience. I can get that, but I need to think like, what is my inner? Where is it coming from? So this masterclass, we are gonna explore intuition, resourcefulness, creativity as a practice, readiness and opportunity. When is the right moment to take certain steps? The visual research, and then how we integrate it into our work. And I can talk about it because in my experience, this has become such a key element because I'm someone who, from Iceland, I went to Paris to learn. From Paris, I went back to Iceland. And from Iceland, I went to New York. And from New York, I went to Berlin. And then went back to New York, back to Iceland, then to New York again. It's like, and each time I'm listening, and often in the moment, I don't know really what's going on, but then I look back and I'm like, yeah, now I understand why this happened. Now I understand why I closed my business. I know that some of you were in my talk yesterday, and that I might be repeating some of the things, but I might just go a little bit more into it. But like I say, it's a skill. Our intuition is a skill. It's something that we all have, but it can also be very blurred, and it can also be very disturbed by all this, what's going on around us. And I think often that we think that it's enough to just look at things or experience them through a screen or I don't know what, like from a distance. But it is something that we, with time we start to learn that, it's also physical. It's about movement. We need to constantly be moving to be able to navigate and to listen to this voice that is on the end. And this is like what I said, like clarity often happens when we are dared enough to make certain steps, that we just take a leap of faith. And it doesn't always make sense often. Most of the time, it doesn't make sense in the moment. It's not only until we go through it that we see it. I love this image. This I found in New York Times when I was living in New York in 2011. And I had been working there for 3 years. And I had been 4 years away from closing my design studio in Iceland. So I had been working as a manager of the trend forecasting company, studio manager. And I was finding this craving of going back into I was like, no. I have to go back. I have to go back and being the creative person I am. I need to find my way back in. And so it was really an inner calling that happened there. But what I understood is that, and I think me and Milena, we were talking about that lunch, that the way that the world has changed in so many ways. And here it's an image that is the idea from the 1950s, like I go into the world, I'm going to study fashion design, and I just go, this is it, or I'm going to become a doctor or an engineer or an actor, and I just go. But the way the world works today, we are, it's much more fluid, the path that we take. So it means that you can learn to be a doctor, but somewhere along the way, just no, I want to bring art into it, or no, I want to, I'm very connected to the MFA Parsons textiles program, and I have a certain role in that program. And many of the students there that are doing masters in textiles, they come from they're architects or they're engineers, or they have some different type of background, and then they are adding textiles to their curriculum, and they do it in a different way than someone. So what I'm saying is that this is part of also trusting where we are heading, and because the world is constantly changing, and now I'm just like, where are we going? I don't know, but it's interesting, but it's also a little bit scary, but it's interesting because I really believe that it's changing like fundamentally, and it already started a few years ago. But so for me, this was so important for me to see this image at that point when I'm like, no, I need to go back in. How do I find my way back in? Because I realized like, yeah, I stepped out, but I just need to find my way in again. And it becomes this way. So a question to you, like, does anyone have a comment about this? Do you have any like take on this? Do you believe that this is how it is? Or is it like, I'm gonna study fashion design, that's where I'm going, or I'm gonna be a photographer, and I'm only gonna do that? No, I don't think so. We have to be much more flexible than that, And that is a good thing. And again, it's like with the inner compass, all this like the core we are, I have to learn to listen to it and trust. I can't be stagnant and be like, oh, no, I just have to find always. It's like the river. But yeah, so resourcefulness. I wanted to mention that because that is a very good quality to have, or especially in this world, because it's changing. I mean, even me when I was the director of textiles of Radio School of Visual Arts, I had a small group of students, and it's a program that teaches very hands-on textiles. And when I was in that role, I always thought what my role should be here, it's not to teach those students to rely on an industry, because in Iceland we don't have an industry really. But what I can teach them or encourage them, empower them to do is to become independent and learn to be like, how can I create my own thing? Because I can't rely, we can go out of studies like, oh, there's no industry, there's nothing, no job for me. How can I take responsibility over that? What I had to do, I'm coming from Iceland, and I spoke about it yesterday, there was no industry. There was no fashion industry at the time. It's a little bit bigger now. So I had to create my own company, and I had to learn how to do that. I would give my clothes away. I was like, oh, you like it? You can have it. You can just wear it. It wasn't until my sisters, they were like, no, Ragnar, you have to let them pay for it. Because I was like just so glad that people would respond so nicely to my work. So I had to like, okay, I need to learn how to do it. So I just took courses and classes, and I just figured it out, but not completely, but I just took responsibility over that because I wanted to be able to do that where I was. And so it is the way we see like where is an opportunity in this situation? And it's the same, like I say, like I closed my studio at some point in Iceland, and I was like, okay, I need to go abroad. There's nothing here. So I found a way to go to New York, and I will tell you that story later. So it's this, the creative intelligence that we need to cultivate. And even if we have so limited sources, or we think that we have limited sources, and we might say like, no, I don't live in Paris, so I can't do, there's no fashion industry like in Paris, or no, in London, it's like, no. It can all happen where we are, here and there in the world. So this is a little story. I mentioned it also yesterday. But this is me many years ago with a former intern of mine, Bilge, who was a farmer in the north of Iceland. And I had my own studio, and one of my clients, she tells me one day, she's like, so Ragnar, do you need industrial sewing machine? And I was like, yeah, I could use some more industrial sewing machine. And she worked at the bank, and she told me, well, the bank I work for, they actually have a factory that got bankrupt 3 years ago, and they are trying to get rid of the sewing machines. So would you be interested in maybe buying one or do some deal? And I was like, okay, I'll look into it. So I contacted the bank, and they said, either you just take it, or we're just finding someone to take it off. And I was like, okay. So I did an offer. It was not a lot of money. It was maybe the price of one sewing machine. I've offered that, and I just tried. I was like, okay, I'll offer you this money. And they said, and they had been trying to sell it for 3 years. So they were like, okay, just go but you need to empty out the whole factory. And I was like, okay, I can do that. So I contacted my friend and colleague who was my former intern, and I say, hey, we need to go to this because she lived close to this town. It was north of Iceland. So I tell her, okay, we need to go to this place. Do you want to buy the half? And we split it. And she is a farmer, so she had like a tractor and something to put it on. So what we did is that we went to this factory, we emptied the place completely, all kind of machines, all kind of fabrics. But this machine was this factory was specialized in sewing underwear for the hospital. And so if you do the next one. So I got suddenly all those it was amazing quality of cotton from Germany that is still today, 20 years later, it looks like new because it was so strong. It was before we did a lot of cheap manufacturing. And they also had underwear that was made specially for this is all like hospital underwear. So I was suddenly like, I had those sewing machines, I had lots of fabric that had nothing to do with what my collection was about. But my collection was about embroidery, it was about colors. So I was like, okay. I bought a washing machine and I started to dye the fabrics in different colors. I started to decorate them, and even those hospital underwear became very 20 people loved to buy it. And so some of the items I was able to dye and just, change and make into what I was doing. And then I also made a whole collection of t-shirts. And this collection I showed in Paris, and this was sold to New York, to a store there. But what my reason for telling this story is that there, I was not really thinking about what is in this factory. I was like, I just see an opportunity. I could get machines very cheap. And I was able to sell a lot of the machines. So I also made money out of it. It was also good because I had a very small studio. And it also kind of opened the door that I was suddenly with a material that I was not used to work with, which was this beautiful cotton jersey. And so I was able to just go and suddenly make a whole new collection. And that was just because I was, of course, at the right moment. This client comes there and she's telling me about those machines. And also, I was just open to use it. It became a value. And, okay, sorry, it's missing a little bit. So what is important is that we work with what we have. We have, I talked a lot about it yesterday, I have limited resources. So I had to find a way how to decorate it, how to make it mine. That was, how do I create an identity with what I have? And my label, Pavlov, was born out of this. And this is my store with my atelier in the back. So it was like a half atelier, half store. We worked there open with, people could see us work there. They could come and talk to us. I had a small team of few women and girls, and that worked for me. But as you can see, all the clothing had some sort of a decoration. So it was all unique pieces still within my collection. And this is something that I would show in Copenhagen and Paris. And I had few different, this was called Fire Flower. I also have it tattooed on my hand. This is the planets. You will see more about it later. But so somehow, with just making things from a very simple way, I was able to create something much more complex. There was no limit to how I felt where I could take it. And that is something when you are sometimes forced to be resourceful and work with what you have. that something new gets born out of it. And that is what is important, I think. And there, this was my question there. It was like, so what I had, it was my sewing machine. And this was literally, it was an old sewing machine at the time. It's still a very old sewing machine from the, it was from the 60s. But a friend of mine, when I moved back from Paris, I started my label, she gave me this machine. And she said it was something that her mom had, and she offered me the machine. And I was like, okay, yeah, I can use it. But it became such an important tool in my studio because everything, and it's a very old sewing machine, it's like the Mercedes-Benz of sewing machines, it's a PUCP 262. And it was like, I was for years, we did like, I would not say hundreds of skirts, but all those fabrics that I would sit and with a double needle. And again, it was in this whole process of making and being and the maker. And that's another thing, the importance of making, I think, for creative people is something that it's also part of how we train our intuition, how we train this inner compass, it's through working with our hands. It's so important. And so the sewing machine, and still today, it's my tool to draw with. But I also, of course, started to work digital because we had to make part of the production some things we could translate into digital and have the digital machine do, but a lot of it was just made with this machine. And this was another one, a pattern that which became, and still today it's a big pattern, and it all started within a hoop and this sewing machine, and I would just be like working my way on it, and I created some sort of a rhythm in it, and like in a lot of my work, there's always something happening on the surface, but there's also something coming on from the underneath. And for me, that has always been a very nice kind of way to think about things. It's like, how can I play with the underneath and the top, and how can this play together? And even my clothes were in a way that you can turn them around, and they were also almost as beautiful on the inside as on the outside, even if they were always supposed to be worn on the outside. But this way of also making as a maker, and I had a lot of, not a conflict, but there were times in my practice where it was a little bit of a struggle. I just want to be able to design and give it to someone else and they make it, and then, I get it. But then I realized, coming full circle, is that no, for me, it's very important part of my work has to be the making. It isn't until I've developed something far enough that it can be something I can give away. But I have to make my way into my creations. I have to do it really step by step. So this was the first dress ever that was made by this, and it was when I was a student in the Art Academy in Iceland, and I was doing this one dress as an installation, and I just took this hoop and I went on and just massively worked on it. And it was a sun, but then it became what it became, like planets. And this became really one of my identities. I have few identities in my work, and this was one of them. And there's another one, but it was the same. And then I called it the planets. It became the pattern of the planets. But you see here the way the dress is constructed, and that was one of my ideas. It was that if you put so much work in the fabric and you're decorating, it also better be well constructed because it's a whole piece. So I could not just put all this work in the fabric and then do a shitty work in how I would construct the material. So this is how, through the making, that my identity starts to develop. It's really through the making. And again, it's a state of meditation for me to really do work, use my hands, and access my work in this way. This was another type of fabric, you can just go like through it. And here, this is what I was also done on this old sewing machine. I used a double needle. So again, here I'm playing with the two colors. I could constantly be changing it, so it was always a unique thing. I was playing with the transparency. Sometimes I would put white underneath or blue, like, and it all changes the color. Again, here is the same, you know, the identity with the colors, the fabrics, and all those things that are combined together. And this photo, for example, here to the right, you know how old it is? Can you guess? What collection is it? Students. What collection is this? What year?
2005.
2005?
5.
2005?
Yeah.
Oh, close.
No.
I think before.
Yeah,
1980s. Not that before.
2003.
Oh, you were.
So it's very old, yeah. But it can also be very current today. It could still totally. I have two daughters and they are wearing those clothes completely like khaki. They're in their defense. So it's the muscle, and I also talked about it yesterday, because to me it's a muscle, and it's and I once had a dialogue with a friend of mine, and that was a painter, and that was where I was in between my practice. And I was asking him, like, so how do you show up for your work all the time? Like, how is it? He was like, this is a muscle. Creativity, like your practice, is a muscle. You just need to train it and train it and train it. And this is my understanding today. That's why I'm so persistent in what I do. It's really about training the muscle. Never stopping and allowing the flow. And another thing that I heard when I was in art school, a teacher said, the key to success is never to stop. Just keep going. Just keep going no matter what. Not even if you don't know where you're going, just keep going. And that is how it was. Yeah. And so, to me, what it has become today is to create for the sake of creativity. I don't really, I mean, I work much more with fine arts today. I still do some design, but the freedom I get personally is that it's a little bit more, to me, it's creating for the sake of creativity. And I have been enjoying the fact that I don't need to follow any season, any collection. So therefore, for me, art has been more accessible. And as a creative, I've become an ecosystem. There's no like destination in this journey anymore. It's just a journey. I just need to be doing this, taking actions, testing different mediums, just, you know, approaching fabrics. It can be approaching paint. Doesn't really matter. So this is my studio here. And so you see there's a lot going on at this moment in the field, but there's also this freedom of experiment. And that, I think, is one of the things that when we enter the industry or we start to follow a certain pattern, that part we need to be careful not to lose, the part of experimentation. That we give ourselves the freedom. That's why we also sometimes need to step out of the rhythm of the daily life in order to find the way to experiment and test new things. Can you go one back? I want to ask you guys, so how many are you students here in the fashion? One, you,
Yes, one.
here. And the other people, are you in what type of industry? Or architects? Okay.
Business.
Business, okay.
Streetwear fashion.
Student,
The streetwear fashion.
street fashion, okay. Yeah.
Engineering.
Engineering, okay. So when you hear me talk about this muscle, what do you think? Like, do you have that muscle? Do you, as an architect?
Well, as you know, always have to rely on this job or
Yeah, the previous project, yes, yeah.
and that's kind of
Mhm.
and most of the times researching bringing my own projects
Yeah.
in life maybe meanwhile I try to create imaginary project of how would I do this.
Mhm.
That's a way of for me to
Yes.
decide.
Mhm. Exactly. It is in any a streetwear fashion. Are you training this muscle?
What's the mushroom?
The muscle is like this. It's a muscle.
Okay.
Training.
Okay.
It's like working out
Mm. Yeah. Every day.
every day. Mm.
Yeah, because I'm like designing every day, designing collections, doing art direction every day. No?
Mhm.
So it's a muscle that I developing everything every day.
Mhm. Exactly. And in business.
Well, I was in business, but I'm more into the marketing area.
Mhm.
And well, I think in my area, we train our creativity all day. Because, well, we have to find solutions, we have to find new strategies,
Mhm.
and also to be, like, to know what is happening outside, like in the market, and also what is happening in your company.
Mhm.
So you can find proper ways to success.
Mhm. Mhm. Anyone else?
I am transformational consultant,
Yeah.
and I really see this creativity as a muscle, but it's along with other inner capabilities that we need to train in order to really use it as the hardware skills we usually talk about.
Mhm.
But really these inner qualities we need to train because it's like this very under the surface.
Yeah.
It's there inside there as you in your explanation, but we need to recognize.
Yes.
So that's one of my part of my work to really make the people can see that we already have this inside us.
Exactly. And of course, we know that, I'm speaking of creativity in arts and design, but of course, it's something that can be applied in anywhere we are, because to be resourceful and see things in a different way, it's the creative muscle in the mind that we need to have up. This because we have to be able to often see ways in a new way. Turn them upside down, or we come to a limit and we need to see new ways. This is a story I also mentioned yesterday, because this became part of my way back into the visual language that I work with today. And this is my mother, and she's pregnant with me here, and she is melting socks. And she was a very elaborate knitter, and she knitted so many beautiful sweaters. And she, in the 70s, I talked about it yesterday, she knitted a lot of pattern from this book called Hansestry. It's a Danish fashionable knit method or patterns. The 70s, very hippie, very colorful. It was also very inspired by the Peruvian knits they had. So there was a lot of patterns that were there that was probably taken from South America or different different southern cultures. But what I like about it, this is from a wall that I had in my studio once many years ago. And I had put up the ancestry. It's before I started doing the digital weaving. I had found the old pattern that I used to draw for her. And this was so I would often sit next to her when she was knitting. It's before I started to study fashion design. And she would ask me, can you draw for me some patterns? And I would just have like a ruler page and I would draw them up from her, just like from my own imagination. So for me, what is interesting, and I have a lot of those moments in my life when I look back, is that what I'm working with today already started to happen so long time ago without me knowing. And the way I'm working today was very distant from what I was doing with my brand Path of Love, for instance. It's a very it's a completely different, at the same time very similar. I just think it's so interesting when we have this experience that when we start to look back and we can see how we can start to connect the dots of where we are at today and what has happened along the way, and it has brought us to where we are. So, and this was a little like the fabric there on the left and the right is also just a part of my experiments with those patterns. But she was a big influence on my work too, and because she was constantly knitting, and that's part of the craft that we have in the Scandinavian countries. We learn to knit when we are kids. It's part of our curriculum at school, in elementary school. We all have to learn to knit. We need to learn how to work with the knit. We need to learn how to mend socks and work with a sewing machine. That's a very Nordic thing, and I'm probably like. I don't know how it is here, but it's not in America, and it's not in many of the European countries. For example, when I was studying in Paris, a lot of my colleague students, they had never knitted, but I had knitted because I had to. It was part of we learned to swim, we learned to knit, we learned to work with wood. So this is my mother, my beautiful mother. And
I have a question.
yes.
Which is something that I might know and I might be getting wrong. In the school, also guys and kids.
Yeah.
Knit.
Yeah.
Everybody.
No, everybody.
No?
It's a curriculum. So there's not even if you're a boy or a they or a she or whatever, you need to learn to knit. But it's like boring things. You need to learn to knit a worm. Something very unusual, very, silly. But you also learn to mend socks, and you also, learn to work on I don't know what you call it, the bands where you can do lines like this, and it's very. I really celebrate that it's still there, that we have it, that the importance of those arts and crafts is still there. Is that different? Is it more? Okay, tell me, because now I want to learn about Peru. Is there a difference between female and male when it comes to craft? Is it mostly females, or is there also males?
But where I studied, there was but I was at seminary, so there was a teacher that told us the first project is gonna be knitting, and we all need.
Yeah.
And it was pretty nice. It was my first approach to and it was very beautiful because what we need was clothes for babies. We were gonna give them to houses where it's clothes. You were experience with me and reminded me to that moment where I first knit something for someone else, and it was a very, very beautiful experience.
Till now, I need, because of that day, because of that project last year, I need to
Yeah.
today.
Yeah, no, yeah, exactly. There's a lot, and what she did, my mother, was that she knitted for a lot of other people. Not to sell, but for as a gift. And so what I did at some point when I was getting back to my work, that I also mentioned it yesterday, but I'm going a little deeper into it. I did because she had passed away a few years before, so I decided that I was going to work with my heritage from what she had brought into my life. And those were those sweaters that she made, and those are directly symbols that come from the South American culture. And so she did not play with them at all. And I took them into my work just as such, without any like thinking about what the symbol or anything like this. I was much more thinking about her and her way of working. But what was interesting for me is there I take something from my environment that I'm so familiar with, that is so much also in my DNA. And I mean, even her sweaters, so what she was doing, always working with colors. And that's also what I did. And she was a brilliant, like a color person. And this is also something I grew up with. I was like wearing Peruvian hats, like as a kid, like all my, like, you know, from 4 to 12 probably, or maybe 12, I didn't wear it at 10. And this type of sweaters. But what was interesting here is here I start to kind of take those patterns, see how I can apply them to my work, and this becomes the final result, which became my identity. This is called a sampler, and it's a very big piece. It's not as big as it's green, but it's quite big, and it's called a sampler. I mentioned it a little bit yesterday. It's the samplers were made where women did. I think it was the women that did cross stitching and they would kind of show their style, and that was their identity. So now, because now you know a little bit my work, because I've been talking about it, you see here the planets. I did also work a lot with stars, and then in the background you also have the planets, and then I'm working with her patterns. And yeah. So I mentioned because it is this was another element that came. So for example, when there were two things that happened, is that I realized that how her work had also influenced me, the blues, the middle of nowhere situation, everything. But another thing is that when she passed, I started to knit. I was never a big knitter myself, but I started to knit, and almost to stay connected to her in this way through the knitting. So the knitting became, so always still today when I knit, I'm not a great knitter, I'm an okay knitter, but it's like I'm connecting to her as my heritage. And again, the daily practice, no goal, that is so important. And this is something I've learned, and this is not a very old discovery for me. And maybe many of you are like, I discovered this a long time ago. But for me, it's only in the past, maybe, I would say maybe 6 years. Since I started this daily practice, it was to understand that I need to be constantly attending to my work. It's almost like writing a diary. So, not having any goal, because before, both when I was a designer and when I was also even working as an artist, I would like, oh, I have an exhibition, I need to work for this exhibition, there's a collection to be made, I need to do that. So it was all kind of an order, someone ordered a dress for me, I need to make that. But now I don't have it, because I have another job, and you know. So, but in my determination, being so determined and persistent, I was like, I just need to show for this work at no cost. This just has to happen. And not to have any goal, but just with the idea, building up a body of work. And for those who have art practice, I think you know the importance of that. Because it is also there, you can see how you develop, how how your work starts to change and become something else. And it's always like, don't think about it in the moment. Like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this now? Like, what's wrong with me? Am I wasting my time? Is this a waste of time? I mean, things like that, my mind can be like, take me many places. But I always said, no, you take it easy. I'm gonna do this thing and I need to show up for it because I need to train this muscle. So for a long time, at the time when this was happening, my studio was in my apartment in New Jersey, New York, close to New York. And it has this very beautiful floor, as you can see. It's like a beautiful park. And I had started to paint with oil painting at the time. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna paint in my studio in my home, but I couldn't do it because the floor is so beautiful. And I was so afraid, even if I would put things on it, I put plastic, I put all. But that, like the freedom expression of free, like it didn't work out. And then I remembered, and this was so interesting, and this is also what is interesting. It's like when we go and we just search for it. And I remembered that when I was studying in Paris, in my final project, I started to work with ink. And my prints that I graduated with, they were all very large panels. They were like storytellings on a large panels. And I had made the drawings with ink. But then I just, then I just went to Iceland, I studied art, I studied label, and I never did anything with ink again. So I was like, yeah, but I remember I enjoyed it. I enjoyed working with the ink. Maybe if I start working with ink, I can continue to have this expression that I need to do because I need to continue to work. I need to work out and to work out my creativity. So I started to do those drawings. And first I started really to play with the heritage of my mother, the South American patterns that you all know. But then because it became a practice, those drawings took a life on their own and they just became something else you can do no. And it was so interesting. So I was like, I'm just gonna I'm gonna start just doing this daily practice, like I was writing on a journal. And I was just drawing whenever I could, but I had my job, but I would do it sometimes when I would wake up. Often before I went to bed, I would sit down, dedicate the table, and that's also something that I love to share. Because I had once heard a lecture in Iceland from one of our most recognized artists, who's a very conceptual artist. And he was talking about his work and And then he shows a picture of his studio. And the studio was in his home, just a desk, was a stack of paper and a pencil. So this is my studio, this is what I can do, this is my practice. Practice at this table. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna do this now. I just put up a table that became a dedicated practice table where I would not need to take the inks, the pencils, pack them, put them up on the shelf, take my papers, hide them. It just was there all the time. I just left it. It just had to be in this place. Sometimes this table was in my bedroom, sometimes it was in the living room. But it was always dedicated. And then what is important, and that is very crucial for us as artists or even designers, is that we keep the work on the wall. So I can take it in and I can continue to have dialogue with it, even if I'm not at it. So here I'm lying in my bed, it's in my toes, my blue toes, and I put everything that I had at that point at this, and it was more than this. And I would just lay there, just like look at it and talk to it. And, I was like, okay, I don't know where you're coming from, but, and it is really like that. And it became such a, much more like almost like a living organism, this ecosystem, but my mating has become. It's like, what is it all about? I mean, yeah, you see some elements that are from something, but really this practice, I don't really know like what's gonna come, or is it gonna be one deity or a whole story of people in the forest walking around or flying out in the sky, or I don't know. But there's something about it, about just don't have a goal, just show up at this dedicated table. And this dedicated table can be something different. It could be a loop, or it could be watercolors, or sewing machine, or anything. Like, but what is so important, and I think this can apply to anyone, no matter, they don't need to be in anything, you know, but just to have a place where you can play around. A place where you can, it's my sacred playground. It's my sacred practice table. It's gonna be there. And today, this has become, when people come to my studio and they're asking, they want to see my work, they're like, wow, where did you make all this? I'm like, it just happened because I was showing up. And another thing which I like a lot, and when I had forgotten about it, but I once did like a writer's class. And the teacher was an Icelandic writer. She's the granddaughter of our one Nobel Prize, Patulaxis. Sigurður Jónsdóttir. And she would say to us, she was like, just if you can show up, write 10 minutes a day, just 10 minutes every day. Just, you're gonna build it up. That was also something I heard and I picked up and I applied it to my practice. Even if it's not about writing, just do a little thing, like every day, just show up. Yeah, showing up, even if nothing happens. And that's another thing that now my studio is no longer in my home. I have a beautiful studio in an art center in Jersey. But the ink practice actually is in my home because I need to have access to it whenever I feel I need to do it. And that is important because it also became something that if I would wake up in the night, and some of you might have this experience, when you wake up and you just can't go to sleep. It's no way. I'll just stop fighting, turn on the lights, sit at this desk, and just have usually one drawing. I would be able to go back, and I was like, good. I mean, this is like, to me, like creating, it's so sacred and so important. And I really believe that anyone in any, wherever they are in the world, we all have this. But some of us think that, no, I'm not an artist, you don't need to be an artist. It's just a practice. But with time, yes, yeah, it's about building up the body of work. And certainly, I've had this experience today that when people come, I have a lot to show them, and I can hear what they have to say about my work. I can hear what type of feedback, because I can show them like there's like it's not like 3 drawings. And so it really has to come part of my system. And yeah, I don't know why it's like this. But okay, I'm gonna talk about red and it's okay. Okay. Yeah, just if you do full screen. Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about readiness and opportunities, because you will just go to the next chapter, because it's all about time. And that is so interesting. I even have a small story. I was going to go to Peru 5 years ago, and I had a very important birthday. I'm not going to tell you how much, but it was like half of a decade. And I had told my friends, because of this work, I was like, I have to go to South America. I want to go to Peru, because it's also this connection. I get goosebumps when I say it, because it's so true. I was like, I have to go, like I see those works in real life. It's like where my mother was inspired, and she brought it to me. And my friends, they gave me like a travel fund to go to Peru. But at the time, it was very close to the pandemic and, you know, we were kind of coming out of it. It was not a good timing for me, so I ended up going to Guatemala instead. And I said, Peru is gonna be later. There's gonna be a date for Peru. And so I'm just like, you know, and I continue my life. And then I'm contacted by Milena, and she asked me to come to Peru. Of all the countries in South America, Peru invites me to come and share my work. Isn't that amazing? And I was like, yeah, this is how it is. Just the opportunity will show itself at the right moment. And now more than ever, I'm so ready. So I'm going to be visiting your country more, and I look so much forward to it. But this story is a very important story in my career. And this is also about intuition and this, like, I don't know what's going on. I don't know why I'm doing this. Why am I taking all those, making those decisions? And I shared it a little bit yesterday that after having my studio, Path of Love in Iceland for 10 years, I got to a point where I had to close. And it was for many reasons. I think in a way it was probably a burnout and, you know, I was a young mother and I was building up this business, blah, blah, blah. But I decided I need to close this down. And it was just a year before we had a very big economic crash in Iceland. It was in 2007. In 2008, everything collapsed. So what I did is that I knew that I had to go abroad to find a work. I was not going to find any work in Iceland. We don't have an industry there. So I started to look at the whole world. I was like, do I want to go back to Paris? No. Do I want to go to Scandinavia? I looked at some countries. I looked at Milan. I looked at like different, and I had like an astrologer looking at with me, like, where are the lines, where it's good to be. It was really like looking at those different places. And at the time, I'd been working in Iceland for 11 years, and I had been working, when I was in Paris, I worked for the company I currently work for, which is this trend forecaster. Her name is Leah Edelkort. She's a very big name in the trend forecasting industry. She's a pioneer in many ways, amazing person, amazing visionary. And after my studies, I did internship and I did freelance, and then I just went to Iceland and I said goodbye. I did not have any contact with him for 11 years. But at this moment in my life, I'm looking, like, what can I do? And I knew that I want to work in the industry, but I don't want to, but I cannot do it in Iceland, or, you know, I had to go. And my husband at the time, my daughters were little, and we were like, yeah, we are ready to go. He's a filmmaker, so he's also creative. So, you know, we were all ready to go somewhere. And I was the one looking. And for many, many years, people had told me, you have to go to New York. And I would always say, yeah, I know. But I know if I go there, I don't want to leave. So, you know, I had already a little bit of a connection to New York. So, but at this time, I thought, and we were looking at moving to Berlin. We thought, okay, we'll move to Berlin. Think about that. So I said, no, I need to go to New York before, so I can get over with this idea. So I can at least tell when I'm living in Berlin, I've been to New York. Yes, so I'm good. So I go to New York, and I had found out that the company I worked for in Paris 11 years ago had an office in New York, but I was not touched with that. So I emailed the person who worked there, and I said, hey, I'm coming to New York. Can you meet me? Because I need some advice. I'm looking for different opportunities. So can you meet me? I did not have any reply from the person. So, and this person used to be my supervisor when I was living in Paris and working for them. But we were not in any. So I go to New York, I go there for 1 week, and I knew that there was going to be some fabric shows, and I was going to meet people in the industry, and I was just going to go and see this amazing city everybody was talking about. And a friend of mine was living in New York at the time, so I stayed with her, and she was studying art at the School of Visual Arts in New York. And the first morning I arrived on Sunday, the first morning, I asked we decide to go for a coffee. And I tell her, okay, let's go I want to have a good coffee. I don't want some American thin coffee. I want to have a good coffee. So we go, she was living in Williamsburg in Brooklyn. We go into Manhattan, take the train, we go out of the train, we walk around for 15 minutes or something. And she is like, I know where I'm going to take you. I'm going to take you to this cafe that is close to this park and that. And we go into the cafe, and there's one person sitting in that cafe. And that's the person I had been emailing. That this person that was my supervisor at the job in Paris. No one else was in that place. I was like, what's going on? I was so like, I couldn't believe it. I just like, what's going on? And so she looks at me, and I hadn't seen her for many years. She looks at me and says, Ragna, what are you doing here? And I go to her and say, I was kind of looking for you, but I didn't know. This is like old Manhattan, old New York. It's that's the country for South America's paradise. They asked me to come. And this is, so I tell her, I say, Emmanuel, I was actually looking for you, and I emailed you last Friday. And, and she was like, oh, I didn't receive it, blah, blah, blah. So I said, yeah, I would like to meet you because I'm looking for new opportunities, and I wanna, tell you what I just closed my company, and, blah, blah. So we make a decision that we are gonna meet 2 or 3 days later. And so speaking of this key thing, key part is that opportunities, if you're ready, it's not one door that is going to open, there's like 10 doors opening. That's how it is. If it's the right moment, the right time, the right place, it's going to happen. Sometimes we don't know why things are not, don't happen, but then it's not the right moment. But there, so I meet her, and at that time when we meet again, it was a few days later, I was of course in love with New York. I was like, I love the city. This is amazing. Like everybody in character all the time, like a lot going on. And I was just like, I love this. So I go and meet her, and I was like, I just want to move here. I don't want to come to New York. This is amazing. I don't want to go to further in Europe. I want to come here. So I meet her in a cafe, and again, or a bar, and I tell her what I've been up to for the past 11 years. I had this brand, I have all those fabrics that I been making, and now I'm just open. I want to find a work somewhere. Can I work in New York? And she tells me, well, actually, right now, I've been looking for someone for a very long time, and I'm very picky, and she was very picky of people, but she was like, I don't want to work with Americans, I want someone else. Would you be open to come and work for me as my assistant studio manager? And I was not expecting that when I met her. I was not looking for a job with her, anything. So I was like, yeah, well, let me think about it. Because I really was not expecting it. So I was a little bit like, not so sure. Then I went home, like to my friend's place, and I was like, oh my God, I was offered a job in New York. And it's not creative, but it's a managed job. But I can do that for some time because I'm in this transition. So the day after, I contacted her and I spoke to my husband. And I was like, so I was offered a job. And he was like, I knew it. I knew it would go and something would happen. You just had, then you like, okay, I didn't know it, but okay. So I was offered this job. And not only that, but like I had my visa a few weeks later. It just happened, duck. Another thing that happened in this process is that this was in January, I moved there in August. I moved everything, my daughters, the little kids, my stuff to New York. And 2 months later, the crash happened. And the crush meant that we were not able to get any money from Iceland. People couldn't really leave Iceland at the time. People got stuck with all kinds of financial situations in Iceland at the time. And suddenly, I was just there right before it. It was almost like if you go from one platform to the other, I just made it to that platform, just in the right time. Everything was the right thing. And so for me, that was such a testimony of you never know. You never know when that door is open. Never know where you're going to be invited somewhere or where something opens up for you. Never know. So I don't know if you have any personal, does anyone have any personal experience about the right time, being at the right place at the right time? Or is it like a daily thing for you?
I think also it depends on the moment. Like,
Is it the right time?
yeah,
the moment-
exactly. But
Yeah.
also, I think when situations are like hard to handle, for example, the pandemic, it was a really good opportunity to see something else and to approach another way of thinking the plans that someone is looking for. So maybe it, as you said, is the right time, but you see that opportunity because you are out of your comfort zone.
Yeah, I think there's a lot that happens out of. That is like the floor I talked about. It's the same. It's like you have there is something in your way of doing things. You're in a crisis.
Yeah, exactly. You need
The crisis force you. The crisis can be different, like there's all kind of crisis. But sometimes the crises are forcing you. So now when looking back and looking at that moment when I meet this person of all the places of man, all the places of 8 million. There are 8 million people in Manhattan, New York. Come on. So how is that possible? It's crazy. We're like, this is how it is. But it is, again, like it's you never know. So with what happens there at this moment, it was like another chapter start, another chapter. And I was willing to do something that was not my dream job. You know, it was not, I was not going to be a manager. You know, that's not what I wanted to do. And that's not what I was going to do when I went to Paris to learn fashion. But still, it became like a chapter in my life that brought me to where I am today. You know, it's this journey, like what I've talked about yesterday, all those different projects I'm working on. You were Textile, I'm here. And, you know, I met all these amazing people that I'm back at my art in a different way. All this, because we all have those unique journeys. There's nothing like, oh, he's doing it this way, maybe I should be doing it that way. You don't know. It doesn't always make sense. And it's so important to remember that it doesn't always make sense. And in the crisis, like Andrea was talking about, we don't see anything. We just see the crisis. But if we move through the crisis, there will be a moment we will see like, now I get it. Now I start to. And because you start to recognize this, it gives you power. You start to trust more. But it's not always like, I just need to trust it. Just go with the flow. So that was my little big New York story. It changed my life and the lives of my family, the lives of, many people. Okay. Visual research. This is an ongoing practice I have. And it's also something I just believe in. I believe in being constantly curious. I believe in collecting. I believe in seeing, just looking at things, seeing something in what we see around us. And because I'm a visual person, obviously, but this is an old story. I remember it's an old story of me being a visual person. But even this, like when I was a young person in Iceland, teenager, I would buy magazines. Some like one that I really loved was called Interview. It was a big format. It has beautiful paper at the time. Amazing photographs. It only worked with top photographers. I would just buy it for the photos. I would just to look at the photos, like. And it was also a way to start to see and to just open up the mind. And the visual research, to me, is all about creating my own bag. So I put into my bag, like I put money in my bag. I'm not always good at putting money in the bag, but I do it. And it is like that. It is like, and this is also it's a practice. Visual research, constant visual research is a practice. And Melanie, you can do maybe next. So this is, for example, one of my studio pictures where I have constantly, like I see something somewhere in a magazine or I take a photo, I develop it, or there's a material that I like, or an element or a thing, I put it on the wall. It doesn't mean that it's like a fixed mood board, but I put it there because I need to have it in front of me because I'm taking it in. It inspires me. It inspires my work without any intention. It doesn't need to have any intention. It's just there. And so this has always been there in one format or the other. Really. No, the one before, yeah. So this is like my studio often is like this. I have work, I have threads, I have some sort of paintings. I make work, I put it on the wall just so I can take it in and I can think about it, and it starts to tell me things. I make some sketches again, I keep them on the wall, I keep it in front of me, I keep it accessible. It helps me to take it, even if I'm doing other things. I don't need to be, I can make a thing, I put it up like I did with my drawings, I do with my textiles, I do with my paintings, I keep it up. And then sometimes I just need to put it away because it's in my way. But for a while it's there because I'm taking it into my system. And the same with colors. Like now I'm working on an exhibition and they have an exhibition in Iceland. And I was in Iceland in November, and I was like, oh, I need to be working on my colors. And I was like, oh, I want to work on a certain color palette. And my daughter was buying some things for a party she was hosting at the party store. And I was like, show all those balloons. And I was like, wow, I'm just going to select colors from here so I can start having them in my system, even if I'm not in my studio. So I selected those colors. My thread is the same. My thread is like paint for painters or my paint. The thread is really that. It's like it's just my colors in one form or the other. And this is just to show you it's a very practical stuff. But it is like this. And this has been going on for years. So I have a Dropbox. I don't know how, I'm sure that we get some. You're learning this in school, some sort of things about visual research, I guess, yeah. And probably ways of storing that. I wanted to share with you the way I do it, because sometimes I'm obsessed with trees, or I just see textures, or I see circles, or I see knits, or I see this, or I'm working on some specific research. I always need to put it into a place so it's accessible when I need it, when I'm working on a project or an art or something. And I can have pictures that come up again and again or something. And I go to exhibitions and I take it in. It's not because that's the thing. The visual research is something that you don't always know how it is going to fuel your work. There's something that takes my attention, something that I see in my room that I think that is interesting. I document it and I put it into a file so it's accessible. I have recently, for example, because I'm obviously very interested in textiles, and I go to a lot of exhibitions or archaeological museums, or, you know, I look into books, I take pictures, and I create collection in PowerPoint. We are now building up a PowerPoint with all my textile research, and the same with textile artists or artists in general. Because I also need to remember names, and I need to remember where it's from. And that's just for me more now than before. But before it was more just about the textures. But now it's also like, I want to know a little bit more about it. So it also becomes my way of learning more. Because inspiration can be everywhere. And you know this, I know that you know. But I still think it's a very important thing to mention. And yeah. And this, for example, this is a picture from my studio here. There's a painting in the background, there's a piece of people of my textiles. And there's a very old detail of a photo I took at the Icelandic National Museum, where I just loved the colors, but I did not pay a lot of attention to it. But then when I start to see, it kind of translates into my work without me knowing. This was nowhere near when I made this work, but this was something that I had seen and I had really taken it in. And that's also what it happens. And there's something about it too, especially for students, that it's so easy to access everything online. Go to Pinterest, go to, you know, Instagram, go to everything online. Okay, we can do that, but there's a whole different experience to take it in from our world. You need to still go to museum, you need to see art, you need to see different things. It cannot all be from the 2D digital world that we live. It's so different to experience. That's why we have to go out there. We have to see the texture. We have to feel it, we have to touch the fabrics. What do you think? You agree?
Yeah, well, personally, I'm not that into fashion. I'm very interested in the fashion business. And that's why I'm here.
Mhm.
And well, like experimenting like the texture, fabrics, also like living experience. I think it will also like give you lots of like, you know, like it will just keeping it in me, and someday it will
Yes, exactly.
like
Yeah.
your case,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
in your previous
Mhm.
work, and now it's part of your personal mark.
Mhm. That's very true, and that is completely my experience. Really. No, yeah, this is the same. This was a detail here in the middle. This is a detail of artwork that I saw many years ago in New York by artist Jessica Hemmings. And it's not something that I think of, but I remember this photo. It pops up in my system here and there, like when I'm going through my photos, and just like going at my inspiration. And then I realized, like, I'm somewhere in my subconscious mind, it's also translating into my work. Somewhere this palette that I was so attracted to translates into my work. But as a designer, of course, and that's also, I like to look at that too, because as a designer, I would do the other way around. I would take this and I would say, I'm gonna use this color palette into my work. But there it's more about collecting things. I don't look at them so much. They are there. I keep them in certain places, and then it translates into my work. This is the same, you know, this is a detail of this is my design here, exhibition I did. And to the next, it's like textures that I gather, that I like, and I think is interesting. And they inspire my work in the same way, you know. And this is more about the textures, more about the 3D. It's not exactly the same, but it's definitely the same type of inspiration. So this is me painting, because part of my practice is painting. And this is important for me because when I started to paint, and that was another thing, I was like, well, I remember when I was studying in Paris that I really liked when we had to paint textile patterns, so I'm gonna explore painting. And I did that in COVID, and I started to explore painting. And first I was like, what am I doing painting? I'm a textile person. And that was before, like, back to the ink. So I was like, you know, it doesn't, but what I realized is that my visual language, my visual work stays the same no matter what medium I'm working. It's just the same. And if you go to the next one, which is like, even the colors are the same. Like, this is 2003 and this is 2023. 2023 and 2022. So it's like, and to me, that has been such a like a big discovery also of my practice. Is that it doesn't matter like where the inspiration comes from. It's and the visual language is the same. So today I don't think about it. It's just I just approach. And I'm not calculating it too much. Of course, textiles are my main. The other expressions are also important. And I know today that it is just another form of expression of the same visual words. It's the same. I communicate the same things again and again. And here you can see that this word that is coming out of me is also translated here in a different. This is the same. I showed you this yesterday because it's called Circles of Life, and I think it is such a. For me, it's so important to stay excited as a creative person, to stay hopeful as a creative person, to stay enthusiastic as a creative person and open-minded. Even if I start to do streetwear styling, or I study fashion or business or architecture, or I'm an engineer, it doesn't really matter. Like, that's where I'm at today. But it might take me somewhere where that becomes part of my journey. It doesn't become the end. Because the journey is not the destination, it's really the journey itself, you know, that is important. So when I was, my conclusion to this is really about stay creative, train this muscle, and never give up on it. Even if you're like, there's nothing here. Find a way, and it's really about like, and just, you know, stay tuned in. Because we all have that in us. We all have that compass who is there to guide us. And that's the same thing like in trend forecasting. The profession that I work in also in New York is that a trend forecaster can give you a color palette and say, those are the colors for spring, summer 2028. And as a designer, you will look at those colors and you'll say, yeah, I saw this coming. I saw that coming. What the trend forecaster does for you is that he confirms what you are already sensing. That is so important, because if you would start to talk together and you talk to each other about what am I sensing about what's going on, what do I find interesting, you would probably find like you would kind of be sensing the same thing, because it's all in the air, you know. And so another thing that I think today, and this is my experience, because I can only speak from my experience, is that my lived experience has become a value to me. It has become something that I can pass on and I can share it because I've gone through it. I understand it. I understand what it means to be an artist who is blocked or lost the hope, or he came to an end to something. And I also have experienced the moment where it's like I'm coming from underneath water, and then just like the head is something, give me air. I just need, like, it's really like that. It's like, no, it's a mistake. I need to go back at it, you know. And for years, I would like to see the wagon pass. And I was like, I can't jump on it. I can't jump. It took me so long time to get back at it. But once I did, I was like, there's no way I'm going off this wagon, and I'm staying here, and I'll just train this constantly. And it is very easy to think today, like, because it becomes also about like, how do I survive in this world? Can I survive as a creative person? Like, is it, you know, is it feasible? Does it like, is it respectable? Is it like, does it give me money? Am I able to survive? But that's another thing. Like, if we're open-minded, then I have a full-time job still. You know, I'm still working on other things. I'm not full-time, but my goal is that one day I get back into that space. But it's just about me being that creative person, practicing always.
Yeah.
But that is also about acceptance, of course, and there's a lot of different elements in. But so, does anyone have anything to share with me that you feel I'm missing? And you know. Yeah, for example.
No, I was just thinking that it's very important what we're saying, because when we I mean, me as an artist, or when we push art, you know, this idea that the inspiration comes and then it all happens, and it's really, I mean, I think this is what's called art practice, because you have to practice it and you have to do it and you have to show. It's always a struggle, because you have to be, you have to survive, you have to be creative also. But I think it's a mix between being open, but also have a certain discipline. Because I think it's that kind of like that tension between those places that I think you is eventually. But it's hard to show everything. It is difficult to like make it something that happens all the time when you have, you know, your life or your family.
Yeah. It does. It is not easy. And we also have this idea that I also think is so, we need to be so careful about the idea we have of I can only be a creative person, or I can only be an artist if I'm doing it in a certain type of way. And that actually was, I learned that in New York, because New York is a very tough place. And we need to work a lot to be able to stay there and live there. And part of my practice is I create exhibitions. I look at other people's work, I bring it, I create exhibitions, and to me that has also become one form of, I mean, to me, it's almost like I'm creating a piece of something. It's the same, I need to go through the same, you know, it's the same journey. I cannot skip any step. Just as there's an idea, it has to be I have to go through this, that, and then this happens. Then it's here. But in that way, because I come from a country where we have grants for artists, you can apply for a grant. I once got like an artist salary for 3 months. I was, you know, selected the city artist of the town I was in. I got money for it, lot of money. Scandinavia still has that, and there's in Norway they have like 10 years artist salary, or 15 years artist salary. You can get an artist pension, like. But they are a rich country with oil, but it's still in the mindset of the Nordics that we support art. So, but what happened for me, like I started to see things differently in New York. I would visit artists in studios there, and I understood this. I started to understand Now you need to work hard just to stay there because it also, it's a tough city, but it also gives you a lot. I mean, you can see amazing art. I mean, it's a very vibrant city. There's a lot of amazing energy, but it's also very tough, and it can also be a question of, you know, do you really need that, or can you get it as well? Anyway, I would visit those artists, and they would have full-time jobs. They were all working on creating a body of work. When I would go and see them, they would show me a lot of things. And that was to me so different, but there's no support system, not in the way that it is in Scandinavia. So it became an inspiration to me to think about. So even today, I'm doing a show in Iceland in February. It's in a museum. I get paid like $2,800 to bring my work into the museum. We did a whole campaign in Iceland, and it was also in the Nordic countries many years ago, or like 15 years ago, that was called Pay the Artists. Because in the museums, what happens is that artists would exhibit in museums. Everybody are paid, the curator, everybody, but not the artist. And the artist, that's the one. So there was a campaign, and this changed. So I'm paid for it, but I'm not on any artist grant. I'm just financing it myself. But okay, I have a full-time job. But still, like, I'm doing it, and there's something in me. It's like I'm happy that I'm able to do it without a grant. I know how important it is. So I have created a situation where I'm able to do it. I saved money, I made a space for it, things like that. But it took me a long time to organize that. It's not something like you do like that. But so you just start to think differently. Fashion student. What do you say? Tell me.
Well, me, I am a lawyer.
Oh, you're a lawyer.
I'm a
Oh, I
lawyer.
thought you were
I like it. Art and other. Yeah.
Okay.
So we will usually we need the order. Or I like to. For example, if I to go to museum with some other as a class, for example. And also it's the international relations. Consequently, I need to government to understand the world. But to join the art with my career.
Yeah.
Because I want to became a teacher of international relations. Shortly, I think that the art is my career. I really like it.
Interesting. Diverse group here. One of the students, tell me, are you students? You three girls? Are you students in fashion? No? You are a student. You are a fashion student. I thought, yeah. You wanna share it with us?
Yeah, I try to have the idea, it's an idea of practice different things to maybe more potential with my creativity. I think things that I see in my career is not enough. I also practice seeing or reading about another projects or another practice like paint, sculpture, also films, videos, and important to have a more vision, not just in the career. Also, I think that the last objective to be a creative director in all this practice that happen in art and design.
Yes, to also think about other elements that you can bring into your supportive. Anyone else?
one thing the inspiration find you working. And
Yes.
I think the same video with I feel those stories, the moments where you do find the person you don't really find the opportunity to come back, but also you did the work like and still you were very active looking for them, looking for them working, and that's why the opportunities. That's very valuable.
That is true. I think that I also believe that it is important, and that's why, yes, we can train this muscle, but it's also to never stop. Like keep going, keep doing. Like if you find a challenge, we can be defeated by a challenge, and we can like lose the hope in the challenge. I mean, I've experienced it many times. But you stand up again and you just find your way. And it can be, and often that is through movement, like meet people, talk to someone, connect to someone. And to me, often connecting to, like when I talk to people, it's like I plug into, also my being is plugging into someone and I start to understand things in a different way. To me, in isolation doesn't go very far. And that is what was so hard with COVID, because we were so isolated in many ways. So today I'm even more my conscience tells me more how important it is to connect to other people, that it's not me in a corner. That I cannot go very far alone. I need other people in my life. And even like, I mean, you will probably know this, it often happens in my studio, I can't find something. And I tell my assistant, like, I can't find this thing, you know, and I've been in my mind about it for a while. And then I tell her, I get, have you seen da 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 da? And she's like, no, what are you looking for? And I just open a drawer and I find it. I just had to make this connection and I found it. But I had maybe looked for it for a long time. Something about connecting to other people also.
Rana, what I really liked about your presentation is how you were describing your own iconography. No, you spoke of many identities. Obviously, it's always you in different phases, but always going back to your childhood, if you like.
Yeah.
No, the origin and like giving us basically talking about how you are the person you are today through colors, through the craft, through yarns or fiber. No, the idea of the sampler, for example. I think it's a great way to figure out who you are also in terms of images and how, you know, it's something that a practice that anybody could really approach. You know, we all have different identities. There's so much talk about identities nowadays, but always through, you know, something that comes maybe with a filter or with a photography or with, you know, a photograph or some kind of image or angle, while the idea of the sampler, you know, I'm particularly keen because we also have today some teachers from the textile department that who study, you know, our ancient iconography and how, you know, you develop your own iconography not just by borrowing something, but just by understanding it in a different way. No? I think it's really, really precious.
That is true, and that is, I had other experiences like that. It just came to my mind when you were talking about it, because once I was approached by a choir in Iceland, very nice Icelandic women choir, and they asked me to do their costume, to design their costume. And the reason they wanted me to do it is that my work reminded them so much of the Icelandic national costume. And I was like, well, I've never been particularly interested in the Icelandic national costume. Never, and never thought about it in my work. But in that, and anyhow, they saw that connection. So I designed a costume for them, and and time goes on, and they have their costume, and it's there's embroidery, and there's embroidery, and it's black and gray, and has this kind of reference and the costume. But I did not think about it so much. Then when I'm in New York many years later, and I'm getting back to my practice, I did one art project that was, I decided to take the Icelandic national costume, study it, and I would bring it to America. So I did it, it's on my website, you can see it. It's like a denim, I created the costume, it was costume designed in the 1800s. And I took exactly the same shape, exactly everything, but I did it all in denim fabric. So it was like denim and checkboard cloth. So it was like cowboy version of the Icelandic national costume. And I called it the Icelandic costume goes America. So I'm studying like this Icelandic costume that I'd never been interested in. But I had to be now in America. And that brought me back home to, kind of connect into my roots again. And then I remember that when I was in Paris studying, and for my final project, I had gone to Hungary. And I did my final project with inspiration from Hungary, from Budapest. And I had worked my inspiration from the national costume in Budapest. And when I started to look back at this book, the Icelandic costume, it was all the same, like they all have the same form, just different type of color stories. But it was the same. It was like something in my environment that I was not aware of. And this choir saw, but I was never thinking about it. I was like, Icelandic costume. But they saw it. And then I started to see the connection. So it is really like that it's somehow it's in your DNA. And I always said it, like, Icelandic designers, no one has this color palette. I mean, still today I don't see any, and it's not because like it's my color palette. It's just like, no, this definitely comes from somewhere, from those roses, because they were always like in front of me in this very bitter land, Iceland is. I would always have those colorful roses in the house, in the greenhouse. So it's so much in and for my sister. Okay, thank you for your time. Thank you.
Bueno, de esta masterclass nos llevamos algunas ideas centrales, como dijo Ragnar, entrenar el músculo creativo como una práctica constante, más allá de la disciplina, observar el estímulo y reconocer que la inspiración puede surgir en cualquier lado, sostener el hacer diario poniendo el foco en el proceso y no solo en el objetivo, pensar el tiempo y la visualización como partes fundamentales de la creación, y entender que crear implica seguir haciendo una y otra vez y de manera consciente. Estas ideas dialogan directamente con la forma en que desde arte, moda y diseño textil entendemos el diseño, desde la colaboración, el proceso colectivo y las prácticas. Muchas gracias a todas, todos y todas por acompañarnos hoy. Con esto damos el cierre a la masterclass y los invitamos a acompañarnos a las 6:30 p.m. en el pabellón Y de la Facultad de Arte, que está en la mano derecha, que realizaremos el desfile de egresados y será un gusto compartir con ustedes el trabajo que hacemos desde la especialidad. Muchísimas gracias.